What does it take to make workshops work? And how can we facilitate collaboration that sticks and leads to results? My name is Miriam Hartness, and with the Workshops Work podcast, I'm on the mission to find the magic ingredients that make workshops work. Today with me on the show, a bunch of people, because we are hosting a fishbowl conversation and invited the SessionLab community and the NeverDoneBefore community to discuss the State of Facilitation report 2024 that was published by SessionLab early this year. And we discuss about the fact that most facilitators nowadays have neither an accreditation nor a certification, and to what extent this could in the long term harm the profession of facilitation or actually open up the field. And we discuss about tools and to what extent facilitators might hide behind their tools so that they don't have to use these skills that they might have learned in a facilitation course on how to deal with conflictual situations or difficulties, and how actually the use or non-use of tools depends on the context and whether it's a large group, a small group, online or offline. And finally, we discussed about co-facilitation and the value of community, because at the end of the day, you cannot learn to facilitate yourself. You have to be in community with others, whether by learning, practicing, or just talking about it. So enjoy the conversation. And by the way, if you don't have pen and paper at hand to take your own notes, scroll down to the show notes to download my one-page summary. Enjoy. Welcome, everyone, to our first fishbowl between two communities, the SessionLab community and NeverDoneBefore. I am joined by Deb and by Karen, who have both contributed to the SessionLab report, State of Facilitation, that will be at the core of our conversation today. We have selected 3 juicy topics that will hopefully trigger some controversial conversations. This is a fishbowl conversation. So the idea is to have the SessionLab community here and the NeverDoneBefore community, and together discuss some topics of the SessionLab report 2024. Maybe you can give us a brief introduction of what is SessionLab. If anyone doesn't know SessionLab yet, I would be shocked. And why would a company like SessionLab invest money in creating a State of Facilitation report?
I am Karen. I am the community host for the SessionLab community, and this is the first time we've done a joint event with the NeverDoneBefore community. I am more involved with the promotion of the events and the report. I've been working with Deb mostly on getting the report out there, speaking to other people, and organising events that are also related to having discussions more about the report itself. And SessionLab, if you don't know, is an agenda planning tool. And we also have lots and lots of resources as well. And the community is one of those resources where it's a little bit more conversational and we actually get to meet people. It's good to meet you all.
Thank you. Deb, what's the facilitation report?
What's the State of Facilitation report? Well, first of all, if anybody hasn't read it or doesn't know about it or doesn't know about SessionLab, I wouldn't be shocked. I didn't know about SessionLab for a long time, and I've been facilitating since 2009, which I have been told makes me a dinosaur in this space. But I didn't know about this software tool. And then, of course, I learned it, eventually started working for it. It's pretty cool. It's a pretty brilliant tool. And there's resources in the community and all that. And why would a company invest into doing a report? So we started working on this project for a State of Facilitation report that comes out every year, 2 years ago. So this is a second edition. And it was born, as I think most of your favorite projects are. We wanted something in the world. We didn't see it there. We decided to be proactive and make it ourselves. Many professions have their yearly report. Developers, programmers, and facilitators apparently didn't. Some people did some surveys and some nice reports, including people in this room. But they weren't continually every year and weren't as comprehensive as we hope we made it. So we sent out a survey 2 years ago. About 1,000 people responded who call themselves facilitators. We do also ask in the report, what do you call yourself? And that's an interesting page of the report because some people call themselves consultants, trainers, team leaders, managements, facilitators, moderators. And there's some interesting statistics nationally and gender-wise even. Apparently, consultants seem to be a word more used by some people. And so many interesting facts came out of that report or data. And so we decided to do it again. The idea is to keep doing it every year so that we can see trends, although we might decide to do a big one every 2 years and maybe a small, more focused one every year, because it's lots of information. It's free to read online in PDF, divided in chapters. So our hope is that depending on who you are and what you do, you'll always find there something that's actually useful, not just you're curious about, but that's actually useful for what resources you might want to read next or career orientation.
So now we are all aligned on board of what the facilitation report is. I would like to start off with a topic that was actually put forward by Barb. So thank you, Barb, for highlighting that. And the quote from the report is, "Data shows that facilitation is learned on the job, picked up informally, and strikingly often is not a certified or accredited skill for those who work with it." What we then see is, and this is just data for the last year, but the overall data just looks similarly striking, that 85% of those who have answered the report didn't have any training or accreditation in the last year. In general, in total, it's very similar. So the question for the fishbowl is, do we need certification or accreditation as facilitators? And what if we have neither? Can this harm the profession? The reason why I wanted to start with that, or also with this provocative question, and feel free to turn your camera off so that we can also get a sense of who wants to join the fishbowl. I have to admit, and I think most people know, that I don't have a facilitation, accreditation, or certification. And still, I believe that I'm a good facilitator. And so I have been promoting or sharing that, we don't need formal certification or training to be a facilitator, and maybe we learn best through community on the job and so on and so forth. And still, now I wonder, what happens to the profession if suddenly none of us follows courses and everyone believes that we can just learn it on the job without a certification, accreditation? So what are the different sides of this fact and this trend? And I would love to ask Barb to comment on that, because I know that you were curious about this. I'm sure you have an opinion. And then I will leave it to the fishbowl and we see what happens.
So thanks, Miriam. So this is interesting because I make a distinction between training and certification or accreditation. I did not take any kind of accreditation until I was in I'm in my 30th year of my facilitation company. I think I finally did the International Association of Facilitation accreditation in my 8 years ago. So let's say 8 years ago. And I had thought long and very deliberately about it, and I had a criteria. One was, am I taking an accreditation because, first and foremost, it's adding value to my work? I have never been asked in 30 years about an accreditation. And so there was a cost-benefit aspect that I considered first of all. And then, so it was always too expensive for any kind of benefit. Then there was the professional learning. And I went, I can go and learn by taking a full course and probably learn as much or join a community. So it took a while. And then there was just some factors, frankly, more. I took the certification first and foremost because I felt that there was slowly starting to be an awareness of facilitation more than there had been. And there would probably be more people in my area in Alberta, Canada, that were becoming certified. And so the benefit versus the cost became greater. I'm glad I did it. Interesting process, really looked at competencies. I'm not concerned about that. What I'm concerned about is how people are being trained, which, Miriam, you might be talking about in terms of certification. Again, I'm not really particularly concerned about the certification. What I'm concerned about is that people are learning primarily, I wish I had the stat here, on the job. Can you know what it was?
I can get, I can get you the stat. You keep talking, I'll find it.
what I've seen over the years is that, and I'll finish really quickly, people come in learning techniques. And back 30 years ago, everybody wanted to learn an icebreaker, which is one of my pet peeve words. And people learn techniques, and it takes a while, and I've seen like years before they realize there is beliefs, attitude, mindset, approaches that is the foundation. And I think you get that through some of the very wonderful training that is available. And I pass the talking stick to someone else.
To me, because I want to make a distinction that you made in your use of language, but I just want to check that we're on the same page, because this one causes a lot of confusion, which is between accreditation and certification. And because they are used in the report in the way that I use them, therefore, I am incredibly well positioned to define them. So when I say accreditation, I'm referring to what Barb was talking about. In my knowledge, currently, it is only the IAF that does this kind of thing, which is, it is a test or a check or an exam or a process to accredit the knowledge you already have. So it's like a stamp saying, check the knowledge you already have, the skills you already have, and I accredit them. While certification usually comes at the end of a training course and can include or not include practical elements. So I think that distinction is easy to make, and that is all I wanted to say right now.
I will say I do believe there's a few other organizations that offer a facilitation. I was just trying to remember the one out of the United States that, as an organization, I've just lost it. Yes, thank you. INIFAC. Thank you.
You are correct.
Yeah.
I am in Europe and ignoring, but that's you are correct. It's not, IF is not the only one.
It's Dave here. Thanks, Barb, for that. Good to see you. We live in the same town. We hang out together, so that's the good stuff. For me, one of the, on that interesting graph about the where people get an on person, and I had liberating structures, et cetera, I was wondering, with people who are accredited or have IAF or INFAC, those things, are they more likely to have all those other ones, like liberating structures or legal serious play, et cetera? And from that spot, like when you get hooked, are you going to get more certifications or more training? And just throwing that out to the group. I was just interested in know. And I'll just say myself, I'm not IAF accredited. I'm working on a few things. I've won a few awards from them, but I have some of those other certifications too, like from liberating structures, et cetera. So it's just curious.
So are you basically suggesting that they are the facilitators who collect certifications and courses and get accredited?
Yeah, Marion, that's where I was thinking. Is that true or not? Like, I was just wondering from there, like, do you get hooked and you start going from there?
I think there is something that I observe in many facilitators, is this hunger to learn. And I think that's the reason behind collecting certification and getting training is to learn something new, discover new methods, find a new way of looking at our work, than to actually have the papers. Because I think that's a very shared experience that Barb said, like, no one ever asked for a certification. For me, in my beginning, certifications or trainings or like a paper that proves that I can do this work was more for myself. It was like, oh, I have this training by yada yada, so I feel more like legitimized, permissioned to do this work. But I also think, or my concern, like I know the IF at least tries to get facilitation as a recognized profession. That's what they're lobbying for, and that is something that always kind of like rubs me a little bit the wrong way, because if kind of an accreditation or recognition by an institution is necessary, it's a gatekeeping thing as well. Like there are a lot of us who came to this work informally through like doing on the job, by doing it a little bit within a different job, by self-training, self-learning, or attending training. So it's like more an organic pathway into it. And if there's a recognition needed or an accreditation to really claim this profession, it's difficult for those who did it more informally, especially if we look at the pricing of some of the trainings and certifications and accreditations out there. That's like the majority of the world can't afford that. So if we want more diversity in the people who facilitate, geography, but also like class and all the other things, is like, yeah, then we need to be flexible about how someone comes into the work and not be like, oh, you have to pass something and then you can call yourself that. So yeah, that's my feeling around accreditation and stuff like that.
So in my case, I'm happy to add something here. I joined a little bit late and I explained I'm not a facilitator in the sense of I don't have a full-time job that is that. As you have mentioned, I do it as part of my job. Now I'm a product manager. In the past, I've been an engineering manager. And in a corporate world, when you have a leadership role, you are having to facilitate to get to decisions, to solve conflicts. And that's really what I want to, my passion is really about through facilitation, making the day of corporate employees better. So drive a little bit of making it better when I go than when I was not there. And actually, when I started this, okay, let's jump and do this, what I do. What I started looking into is there any kind of certification or training? Again, not the same, but at the same time. For me, is can I learn the ABC to make sure that when I start doing this, I come with a duty of care to the people that are trusting me to help them achieve that, right? So for me, when I look at certification and accreditation comes from there. And I think someone has mentioned the fact that I might go through one of those trainings and achieve a certification also gives me my own reassurance to be confident on myself. So sometimes it's about that self-confidence, more about the way to filter. And for me, because it's not regulated, it was so overwhelming. There are so many trainings, so many courses that say, okay, jump in and just to get the journey, right, of joining these workshops or other workshops. So I might not have the certification. No? It's like, I'm an engineer, I have that, I have the title, but it's about maybe other ways that exist that will give me that confidence. But I do like the question that you asked at the end, can this harm the profession? When people will come with these dreams and best intentions, but without any how-to or know-how.
Yeah. Thank you. And I think that's a great example for someone who just entered the field. And my background is in economics, and we speak about the market for lemons. And the market for lemons is a used car market where you don't know, you cannot see the quality of the cars on the market. So whoever comes to buy a car will assume that the cars are of bad quality and hence are willing to pay less and less, because there's no way to identify. So what happens to the used car industry is it becomes a market of lemons where we can only charge very low fees because we think that they're all bad. And then we need something like certification in order to create a differentiator. And I shut up because I see that Andre and Anushka just joined.
Okay, so I'll just voice Barb. I agree 100% also of this cost benefit. I'm speaking from Brazil, so Global South. So when we talk about cost, for us, it's even higher. And because in the research in the State of Facilitation report, we also see that word of mouth is one of the biggest, and referrals and one of the biggest points of clients that we have. But I think we can harm the profession in the long path if you don't care about this. And when we look at coaching, for example, so at least here in Brazil, there has a lot of controversy about coaches because everyone can say they are coach, and then they begin this movement of accreditation and licensing. For me, what comes in mind is a question actually: how to accreditate a facilitator, how to evaluate if someone is a good facilitator or not. So I think that we naturally go through this path of being asked more and more for certifications and accreditations. I think for when you have like call for proposal, usually you have like if you have, would be preferred if you have any of those certificates. But as of now, as we are still in a quite in-person relationship, we need less. But my question is to everyone: how to give accreditation?
I have quite a response, weird response to it, because for me, a certificate or an accreditation doesn't say someone is good at their job. Like I know a lot of people who have certificates in certain facilitation methods, and they're really bad facilitators. Yeah. So like the paper that says, oh, I'm certified in this method. And I know that the process of IEF is very rigorous. So there is a certain value to being certified by IEF, I think, but it's still like, it doesn't say that you're a good facilitator. And then on the other side, not having those doesn't say you're not a good facilitator. So I think, yes, this can harm us if everyone just comes in and calls himself a facilitator. But I would be very careful to confuse quality with I hold a certification or I don't hold a certification. And also like if we have a accreditation, like who says like who validates that accreditation? Like Miriam and I had that joke at some point where I was like, oh, I don't know if I should be a facilitator. And she was like, do you need a certificate? And I'm like, no. She was like, I can write you a NeverDoneBefore certificate if you need a certificate. So obviously when Miriam had his right to a certificate, it means something, but like everyone can come up with a certificate. Yeah. Everyone can come up with the accreditation process. So it's kind of like, yeah, what is the validation behind that then? Like, so it's a bit of a red tail.
I may jump in. Plus one on this. I think the question that Andre asked about how the certification process happens is a key here. I'm not certified, not accredited, learned on the job. Most of the people I respect in this field have followed a similar thing. I do think it's a good idea to certify, accreditate, simply because it helps to structure the domain somehow, and it can also lead to more recognition for this domain, the skill. But I think it's also not a problem not to have it, because I think informality is actually a low threshold that allows a lot of people to get into this. And I think it sort of leads into the idea of self-managing, self-facilitating teams, which I think is also really, really helpful. But I think that you at least recognize what are the implications, and you have a bit of humility as to what someone can call themselves having gone through a training or something. I think that's the biggest risk, that people indeed run away being terrible, not having the foundational skills, not working on a presence, and believing that they offer facilitation. And it's just not good enough. A technique is only a set of techniques. And I think, as most of us will recognize, is a cherry on top of the cake, but it's not the important thing. At the same time, maybe that's going to be my final thing. There's a self-balancing thing that it also, the people that may not have such a grounded approach and not so much humility might give themselves a bad name, and that means that there's actually business for people that are doing the diligent job at that. Exactly like PowerPoint presentations, there's countless really terrible PowerPoint presenters. That doesn't prevent some people to use the tool very well, and it's always going to be around.
Actually, that's where I'd like to plus one. I think the other area that could really benefit from a lift or a boost in the profession is meetings. Sitting in other people's meetings where facilitation is just not present. It's like we're all, it's death by meeting. And I feel like that is a particular universal problem, at least in corporate America where I am, where it's constant. It is a constant downfall for so many of us sitting in these just really terrible meetings. And I wonder if elevating the profession might bring more attention to that particular issue.
I wondered, just hearing everybody who mostly describes themselves as facilitators or are accredited in some way. I wouldn't describe myself as a facilitator, but referencing other accreditations that I find, it's just sparked an idea in my head. If you were to do a project management course, doesn't necessarily mean you can manage projects, but you might be really rigorous in your agile and like following this set path of ideas that you're supposed to do. And although I think I totally agree with what Anushka was saying about maybe being a learner, always wanting to learn something new, but the application of it when you're actually doing the facilitation, where does that come from? And does it leave space for you to have more creative ideas? Does it leave space for somebody to say, hey, I wouldn't do it that way because this is what this course says you should do? And I think it's interesting, like, what does it leave open if you don't do that sort of accreditation?
And there was one thing I wanted to say, which is just some people here have never had the experience of being asked for their accreditation. I actually have quite often by public administrations. And that, in my experience, and of course, all these are different countries, that was a moment that led me to change a bit my point of view about whether there's a place in this world for accreditation, which I used to think, nah. And it came from people in public office really wanting to hire facilitators and not having a network of friends that they could ask their friends who's the best facilitator around. And so they looked for a list of accredited people. And that, okay, yeah. And somebody said, I'm sorry, I forgot who, maybe it was Barb, that things are changing as there are more and more people facilitating. And I think this is for me, it was one of these elements. As long as we were very few people in Italy doing it, it was very easy to find a contact point for a client and be like, oh, who is in my area? And now it's getting harder. And so I see a bit more value from the point of view of the prospective client in having some way of being like, okay, who's doing this?
And to build on that, I see the link with what Liz was sharing. So I think as more and more people become aware of the skill of facilitation, and maybe they're still sitting in bad meetings, but at least now they're aware that they're sitting in bad meetings. And suddenly there's a skill that is attached to it. So it's facilitation that could be a service to help out of that. And then more and more want to carry that skill with their name. And I think we saw something similar with coaching at some point, where also the world has experienced many bad coaches, and some have complained that coaching is not a protected name or field. And I think that's now what we are seeing in facilitation, that suddenly we might become a victim of our own success. And hence, I want to come back to what Andre was saying is, how can we agree what is actually part then of this course or accreditation, or at least the certification? Because what Ewan said, it's not only about the tools and the skills. And I find it interesting that Ewan actually said that he doesn't have a certification because Ewan, you're training liberating structures. So this is then also interesting, and maybe another layer to the conversation. To what extent is knowing very well how to apply a method like liberating structures or design thinking makes you a facilitator? And how much is it actually about the mindset, the presence, the self-awareness?
So I'm sitting here thinking about other professions and professions that we have historically honored as being great, like everybody was told to be a doctor or a lawyer or whatever. And they have processes. You have to go to a lot of schooling and have a process to be a doctor or to be a lawyer. But then I'm also thinking about teaching. So my first career was as a school teacher, and there is a very rigorous certification program to be a teacher, but yet societies do not honor teachers financially or just in general. And so I'm just looking at these different sides, and I'm thinking about the different professions and ones that need certifications and accreditations and ones that don't, and where we fit amongst those. And there were some really bad teachers when I was in teaching, even though they had all the schooling and all of the, all the paper that said they were certified. So
for me, like my response to that, like having started to become a teacher as well, is that the education that you get is more of a tick box exercise. It's like, oh, they know this theory and they know that theory, but only very late, at least in Germany, that's my context. It's like very late do we actually learn how to teach. So we get all the tick box. And that's sometimes my struggle with training, certification, accreditation. Like it's a tick box. It's like, can I do this? Can I do that? Can I do that? And as long as I pass that tick box, I'm then a facilitator, a teacher, or whatever. But does that actually say I can do the work? Because then the application comes very short. Like all trainings that I've attended had like I run a 90-minute session, and that would be like the thing that I pass on. I know that the IF, the big one, is different, but the smaller ones, like you run a 90-minute session and then you get feedback and then you either pass or you didn't. And I find that a challenge. But also, like, I think we need to, when we look at different training and certification, we need to differentiate who's the target audience. I think there's a value for facilitation training for non-facilitators. So the people who have facilitation as a part of their work, like Liz said, I think there's an absolute value in them getting certifications or whatever in facilitation to add that to their training skills, to their like work skills. Similar that, I mean, when I was working in an NGO, they sent me to have a project management training. They sent us to have a public speaking training. So all of those things. And I think having facilitation of that. And then there's the facilitation training for facilitators. And there it needs to be more than, okay, she learned that method. Okay, they know how to do that. So I think it's also a call for the quality of training that is out there for facilitators, that it needs to go beyond a tool, a method, an approach, but actually for them to find their way of holding space and how they can do that.
A lot of paradoxes there. Thank you for fueling my wicked question. I'm wary of the time here also, but very quickly, also because you invited me somehow, Miriam. I think for me, I'm picking up a very important notion, which is not only to be clear when, for instance, I train people on X, Y, Z about what it is that they can hope for at the end, but also maybe more intentionally, how they can present themselves with that grounding. And I think that a training in particular, it's a paradox, because for some people it feels like, okay, I'm complete, I'm done with this. Actually, for me, and I make it very clear to every trainee on any training I give, it's the start. It's the start of the journey. The rest is your practice with it, because if you don't practice, this leads to nothing. And that's also managing expectations about, so you're not like a certified facilitator coming out of a training.
Miriam, so I'll very quickly say that I've been now listening to everybody very, very challenged around the whole concept of accreditation, because as I said, I'm not necessarily believing that a person has to be accredited, although I really believe that a coach has to be. So I'm thinking in my mind, what does that mean for the facilitation world? Many young facilitators come to me and say, what are your top 5 tips? And one of the things I say is, it's not around accreditation. It's around how are you going to learn? And it's the pathway to learning slide that concerned me the most in the report, that we're still learning by doing, which is essential. Yet does that mean it's me still learning by doing after 30 years? Or is it that also taking training to enhance, to remember? I'm thinking and leaving with, how do I help interested people at any stage of facilitation know that the training that they're going to take is grounded in principles and beliefs and mindset? And that's what I'm taking away right now, how to add to the facilitation world with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all. I think we could have spent even more time digging into that and seeing, okay, what's the differentiator between facilitation training and coaching training, and why Barb and maybe others see a big difference between those. Maybe because coaches rather point at the inner journey, so there is more risk or more harm to do on the personality, or more responsibility. I don't know. This will be part of another conversation. Maybe, unless there are some last words that want to be shared. And otherwise, we can jump to another topic, which is another part of the facilitation report. Is in the past few years, a number of tools have appeared to support facilitators in their practices. Nowadays, we are seeing digital assisted facilitation showing up during in-person events. And when we look at the challenges, then number one challenge for facilitators filling out the report is keeping up to date with the trends. And number 2, and many others below, are dealing with conflict or facing difficult situations during sessions. So I am wondering, how much are facilitators actually hiding behind their tech? And how much is tech actually helpful in the facilitation? And the reason I was pointing at that, or where I'm coming from, is I'm again thinking of, and someone spoke about PowerPoint presentations. I think the moment where PowerPoint was introduced as a support, as a tool for speaking, there were more and more speakers, air quotes, who started hiding behind the PowerPoint presentations. And suddenly it was the presentation, the tech, the tool that dominated instead of the content of the presentation. And I wonder whether the same might be happening for facilitation. So are we hiding behind our tech? And is the more and more tech we're having now actually a harm or a risk for the real facilitation profession, so that facilitators are not taking the courses or the learnings to deal with conflict, for instance?
I'm very aware that I talked a lot already, so but no one's coming. So for me, it's always about why am I using that tech. So it's a lot about the purpose of tech. It's similar to why am I using a certain method. So why am I bringing this tech tool in? Is it actually enhancing the process that we are in a group in? So I think when we lose sight of that and just see tech like a shiny new object, like we saw that in the NeverDoneBefore festival last year, where there was a lot of Miro boards. And actually, like a little bit the feedback we were getting is like, oh, there was less connection happening because we were so much on Miro. And the Miro boards were amazing and beautiful, and it was fun to play with them. But if overusing that tech tool, we're losing connection, we're losing what facilitation makes actually possible to have conversation with each other, then tech can harm our work. And I think we always, as with every method or approach, legal theories, liberating structure, we have to ask, why are we doing this method? Is this method serving what I'm trying to achieve with the group? And I think it's the same with tech. Why am I using this tech tool? Do I do this to be hip or to be on trend? Or everyone right now is doing, I don't know, a Mentimeter, so I need to do Mentimeter? Or is this Mentimeter serving a certain purpose in my design?
Okay, I'll go in, but I'm just laughing a little bit because just the other day, it was the second session with a group, and we'll have 6 sessions together. And I didn't want to do anything too complex because I wanted them to be engaged and talking to each other because they're still getting to know each other. And they were in breakout rooms, but they had a Miro board. And I went into one room to kind of eavesdrop and be the fly on the wall. And nobody in the group was talking because they were all posting on the Miro board. And I was like, oops. So sometimes the tech can get in the way of my intention was to create the connection between the people because it was just our second session together. And so I loved what Anushka said around like being really purposeful about using the tech. And, I didn't actually know Miro. I actually just found out about SessionLab. I've been facilitating for 5 years. I'm so low tech. And I just found out about SessionLab maybe like a month or 2 ago. And I found out about Miro board by a participant telling me about it and saying, hey, maybe you could use that. So I just think it's funny. Michelle.
Yeah. So my first work in facilitation was remote through Mural. And so I got up on the tech pretty quickly and easily. But I'm finding when I bring in particularly the whiteboard like Mural, the setup is so important. The script around what are we doing here? Why are we doing it? And then just orienting people around the tool. Like you have to build that in, but you also have to do it quickly. So it's having people really focused and even giving them prep around before they even enter the session. We're going to use this tool. Here's what it is. Here's why we use it. For the most part, I've gotten positive feedback on the different tools, even SessionLab when I'm working with clients on the agenda, sharing the SessionLab with them, makes them visualize it really quickly and easily. So I'm seeing benefits, but you're right. I think, really being clear in your communication, either with your clients or with the participants about what this is and why we're using it and what the expectation is. We're not expecting you to be experts and do this, and being patient with people around tech is really, really important.
I am trying to stick to the role of holder of the report, because I did want to say that I find it in this, yes, we noticed and we highlighted in the report a rise of digital tools and especially of digital tools in person, which I think is very interesting. Like you see sessions, I had never seen sessions before where a facilitator might ask people to get their phones and do Mentimeter and project it on the wall. And it's all very exciting. But I do want to say, these are the top tools for planning, delivery, and evaluation aggregated 2023, and 70.5, number 2 is offline tools, pen, paper, and markers. So I just want to say it's so, and the others seem to me a lot just the basics of maybe online collaboration tools and productivity tools, forms. And so I wanted to share that yes, there are fancy, shiny things, but also Pen and paper.
Thank you.
Ewan might have dropped in before me, but I'll jump in and talk quickly. I agree with tech is a tool. And I remember when I was learning when the pandemic hit, I just kept saying to myself, tech is a tool for online. Tech is a tool when you're in the room. It's people before the platform. It's talk before the tech. I want to broaden this into a little bit of hiding behind the tools, because I'm taking tools as more than tech, whiteboards or murals. I wonder if a mural wasn't on that list, but that's a curiosity I just mentioned, MURAL as opposed to Miro. So I'm thinking of facilitators hiding behind their tools. The tool can be the technique that you take in a particular conversation technique you always use. Oh my gosh, like dot voting, which I have a whole bunch of opinions about, but they could be techniques. And a facilitator can be so ingrained in their one technique that they're not able to change as they need to. It goes back to my comments about training. Am I a little passionate about this? Attitude, beliefs, philosophies, principles. If a facilitator has that, then when something happens, their design needs to be put aside to meet the needs of the group. They go to that, the way I am going to be with the group, the 3 core things I hold in my mind when there's conflict, when there's a readjustment, and they can redesign on the spot. So I think we have to be sure we don't hide behind the tools in any setting. And it's not just tech tools. It is the methods that we have learned and always use. We need to challenge ourselves to say, I need to be with the group. I need to respond to the group. I need to pull the wisdom of the group with their permission. How am I going to do that? And it may mean a change right in the moment. I'm trying to avoid the pivot word, but what the heck? I'll say pivot in the moment. You need to be able to do that. And I pass it over to someone else.
Yeah, pivot to me, please. Thank you for this, Barb. +1, and +1 to what you said on focusing on the group and on what Anushka said about purposeful. I think this, for me, this is really critical. Sometimes it can actually be purposeful, the use of a tool, but it's still getting in the way. Like if you have a short session and the tool is quite unwieldy and it takes too long for people to get a hang of it, then don't bother. I mean, personally, I prefer low tech because of that, because I want people to really focus, but to each their own. We have different preferences also there, so long as it's purposeful. I do find it's anyway good to educate ourselves and try some of these tools in safe space environments to see how they work, what they can do, whether they work for us, whether they work for the groups. And just a couple of final thoughts on this. It can also be actually, first of all, especially for online meetings, when it's sometimes it can feel a little bit more work than on-site to engage people. It can be a great way to break the rhythm, the monotony of plenary breakout, etc. Something. You can also do some things with some of these tools that you wouldn't be able to do otherwise. So it actually allows you to open your panoply of options. And finally, I think that also recognizing, particularly maybe for younger generations that are like just much more natural with screens and everything, with tools, it might be actually another way to attract them to the substantive work of facilitation via the tool angle. So for all of that, there's some good things about tools also.
Absolutely. I'm just agreeing with the idea of tools and bringing new people into the world of facilitation as well. And with the right tools, I often see facilitators who are, if it's in the right hands, it's one of their magic pieces as part of their workshops. So if it's a tool that feels like it's part of their signature, as I think Miriam has brought up the conversation of signatures in facilitation as well, then it can work a lot of magic. I've experienced a Miro board that was beautiful, and we went through some doors in the NeverDoneBefore festival, and it was all these magical little rooms, and it made the experience really memorable. And then yes, it was Lucy, that's who it was, absolutely. And I've seen other situations when a Miro board has been plopped in front of me and I can't figure out what exactly you want me to do with it. So in the right hands, it can be super magical, but if it's just there and the person is literally hiding behind it, then it doesn't feel right for me.
Yeah, thank you for pointing that out. It's when is it an enhancement of the experience and the purpose why we are there in the first place? And when is it a distraction? And it then also combines beautifully what Barb said with what Teresa said, where she went into a breakout room and everyone was silent, just putting stuff on sticky notes. And I think this brings us back to the art of facilitation, where we have to differentiate when to use which tool, as you said, in the right hands. It's beautiful. If we want to facilitate a deep conversation, don't put sticky notes and a Miro board in front of them, because of course they will focus on filling in the stickies. But if you want to capture information and want to have many ideas with which you can work afterwards, then yes, use a Miro board or mural to capture these ideas.
And I would like to add, I had a very nice call with Anushka last week about facilitation at scale. And when we're talking about large groups, technology is essential. I don't believe I could work and collect data with a group of 100 people if we didn't have these tech tools to use. So I totally agree with Barb that it's about how we use them. And I think we have to have literacy on that. So, because we use tools for everything, right? So even like we have to fill the group. So it's harder to fill the group when we are online, but the in-person workshops or in-person events, it's quite easy to understand when you have to turn on the lights or turn off the lights or go outside or stay inside. So it's the same mindset on my point of view, that when should I use Post-it and when should I use like this digital whiteboard, or when should I use Mentimeter? So, and I think it's experience. I found it funny that keep it pace with all the trends is something that was in a higher note of the concerns of the facilitators. Because yes, and we have to learn by doing, because we have few courses about how to use them. And usually when you have like those manuals and YouTube videos, you teach you how to, if you click here, this will appear. But how to use that, we're figuring out ourselves.
And I wonder in this, with respect to that, I want especially young facilitators then focusing on the wrong thing, because as you say, we can learn all the tools watching a YouTube video and then applying and learning them. Whereas the number 2 struggle, the challenge, was dealing with conflict. And there's no YouTube video, maybe there are a few that help you to deal with conflict. But actually, that's one of the most difficult things, right? And I love your distinction between large group and small groups, because I think also with large groups, usually it becomes very structural. So it's a design job after all, right? Because there's almost no space for emergence or changing gears. And then the small group facilitation is more about conflict and human dynamics.
Yes, but even if the small group needs something new, it's nice to, if you have like 12 people, it's nice to sometimes, okay, let's change it a little bit. Let's stop writing on the markers and post-it and flip charts, and let's go online and do that. I was facilitating a group of very techy people, and for them was useful to everyone grab a laptop or and then go there and digitally engage instead of working on paper, because they were concerned about the letters and if people will be able to read them or not. So for me, it's more about reading the group. Of course, if you have a large group, you have to use technology. Otherwise, it's going to be time consuming, and time is something that we'll have to manage a lot during our workshops. Right?
Yeah, thank you. So what I pick up is there are many different layers. So it's difficult to say. So when we talk about tools and digital tools, are we talking about the tools that are essential? Because obviously Deb was pointing out that most facilitators are using Zoom. Of course, if you do online facilitation, you need a video platform. But then what are the tools and what is the context in which we're using the tools? Because just as Andre just pointed out, for large groups, we do need tech. For smaller groups, we might go without tech. And then depending on the type of participants we have.
For example, like what I do when I facilitate, well, it depends on like I start like checking like what I will do. For example, last time like I did a huge facilitation was a lean inception. So it's sort of like 7 activities to start developing a project. And I started looking for lean inceptions that were already made, also looking in the books. And what you said about like, obviously we can't know which type of conflicts are we going to have, like when the activity is developing. But what I did do is that I read about like, what can I do when I facilitate remotely with a group of 45 people? Like, and okay, when you realize that in Zoom you have to take turns to talk, it's like we have to have another type of tool that will help me. Obviously, we use, for example, in my case, Teams. It could be Zoom, like this camera tool. As I'm a designer, I usually use Figma, and Figma has FigJam, that is another tool that is sort of like a Miro, where you can also build these types of, start describing the tool. Usually what I do is when I plan a facilitation, the facilitation should be explained by itself already, you know? And I also have like an agenda, and I explain with different times, like the all the activity. And when the activity is also long, I just explain like the first step. Then like we gather in the second step, explain the second step and stuff like that. But conflict is something you never really like can predict. So that I think that it's only like experience gives you, and doing a lot of facilitations gives you that experience of, hey, I have an icebreaker over here. Or there are sometimes, for example, in Figma, there are sort of like plugins and rules that let you vote, like, okay, we're not getting to any decisions, but we need to get to decisions because the time is counting, you know? So those kind of things are also some of the things we do.
Thank you. And as we are approaching the end of our time together, I was wondering, with everything that we have spoken about, so how do you keep, and that's maybe, can hear from the different voices, how do you keep learning and leverage between the art, the craft, and the science of facilitation? So yes, they are the tools, they are the tech, they are the communities. How do you leverage? Where do you put your focus on so that you don't get overwhelmed by to catch up? Thank you.
Holder of the survey and report. I just want to say that the question on certifications, the big none is surprising and shocking, but the one that actually caused pain to me is this one, because this one is a question about communities. And we have about 20% of people saying they are in no communities. This one bothered me more than the certification one. Some of the worst facilitators I've ever seen were very lonely people who sometimes, unfortunately, lived in countries or region where they aren't the only one. But now we have all these online resources, many of them for free, many of them accessible in many, many ways. And so this one hurt me because it was like none. But then, of course, also a lot who are in local groups of practitioners. That's obviously growing compared to last year, because last year was still on the tail of the pandemic, and so many groups. The list I had of responses for this was absolutely overwhelming. It would go on for like 200. It's just when people only responded one or twice, we didn't put them in. But so discomforting. Yeah.
Thank you for doing that.
But also comforting that there's so many.
So many communities.
Communities, yeah. Alarming that many people said none, but also comforting that there are so many possibilities. You like that, Ewan, huh?
And as you point out, it's then it's striking if the lonely facilitators actually stand out by low quality. Because if we're dealing with group dynamics, it is a people industry. So how can we learn it without being in groups and being with people? Yeah.
If I may add, I think learning is just by experience. Like, for example, if you have a job that you have to do that stuff, obviously you will learn more about facilitation. But what I usually do is that I look to certain newsletters, design newsletters, facilitation kind of stuff, and I'm subscribed to different types of people that talk to me about like design issues, and there's a lot of facilitation also. And some of these newsletters lead me to communities And I also I've been following some, I don't know, the UX Collective or you guys, IDEO stuff, for example. I also now have been researching, I don't know if you know, this application Discord. Discord also leads you to different sort of online communities. There you can share stuff, tips, tools.
Yeah. Plus one to community as human beings. I mean, it's the beginning and the end of it all, isn't it? We need each other, otherwise we don't survive. It's as simple as that, really. So, so communities, yes. I think, for me, I a few sources that work for me, communities, and of course, Never Done Before, not a surprise, is one big one. I'm part of various communities, more or less structured, more or less frequently meetings or not, but yeah, it really makes a lot of sense. And podcasts like Workshops Work, but not just, are really helping. But even on LinkedIn, you can follow some people that post some really good things. I mean, a tip is Thomas Landhaler, sort of friend, acquaintance of us. He posts amazing stuff every single day about facilitation. Very, very practical tips that I think really help us keep sharp. Co-facilitation, I find, is really good to keep learning, because you reflect on different ways. And if you co-facilitate with more people, different people, really helps. Books, of course, and we have on this call Teresa, who is she's a book curator. You have no idea. So go to her if you have any question on that. And bridges with life, because I think facilitation is a life skill. So I do find a lot of bridges in what I observe, even with parenting, with what's happening on the street, with neighborhood, with whatever. And the final thing, coming from a knowledge management domain myself, is self-learning, sort of critical reflection going on. And of course, after any particular gathering, event, debriefing with the clients, debriefing with your co-facilitators, it reveals just so much. Feedback is a super, super powerful thing.
And I would like to pick up the co-facilitation, as I also saw Liz, and then, sorry, Anushka, I hope you can in a bit. Co-facilitation is one of the things that always stands out as being done by professional facilitators or expert or long-term facilitators. The dinosaurs, and very little done by early facilitators. How come, if we know that we learn the best about facilitation from co-facilitation, how can we make it easier? Or what are the magic tricks to make it work, knowing how difficult it actually is to co-facilitate?
I think my comment can end that. Because the aspect of community that makes them such a big learning space for me, beyond just the exchange I have with other practitioners, is being able to try out stuff in a safe environment with a co-facilitator, where I will receive feedback from peers who want me to learn from this. It's not feedback that it's oh, you didn't do that well, or that didn't do well, but it's always, at least for Never Done Before, which is my active communities, I've always received feedback from a point of supporting my learning, supporting my development. So really this trying out in the safe environment, for me, is what makes communities, beside all the other amazing things about communities, makes communities so rich.
I was going to add one thing about the co-facilitating, something that I've been trying lately, which is scary, but also really pushes me to another level, is I co-facilitate, I invite a participant in the community that I'm facilitating to be my co-facilitator through the entire process. So it's an employee at an organization who wants to up their facilitation level. And so it becomes kind of a facilitation mentoring relationship, but they push me to really think about how I'm facilitating. And then I get a lot of really great ideas. And then I can bill it to the company at a different level, because it's kind of a mentoring coaching relationship. So I have kind of the tech assistant and I have a co-facilitator, but from the organization, not external like me. And that really pushes me to a totally different level of my facilitation.
It's fascinating, and I would love to hear more at another time. This can be an entire separate conversation. Thank you. How do you learn? How do you dare to co-facilitate? Maybe we can hear 2 more voices before we check out.
I'm just keen, as the newbie here, I'm just keen to tell how am I doing now. In my case, I have a role of a product owner in a company that is using the Scale Agile framework for delivering software products. So I partner very closely with the release train engineer. We are both new to the team and we have different years of experience in different places. So we discuss about, we have to organize this workshop for planning or for solving a complex problem or existing conflict? What have you done in the past at work? Knowing what you know about the team right now, what you think it could help. Because both of us come from different places, and going back to the remote approach that Andre was mentioning, part of my team is in Egypt. I'm Spanish, but I'm based in UK. We also understand our teams in each location, from the coffee chats and things like that, that co-facilitating with someone in a different role with different experience, knowing the environment. So having that purposeful preparation brainstorming. So it's not about the workshop, it's about everything you do before, right, to prepare for it. It's the way I'm trying to learn from others.
I love that. And it's basically leveraging the different areas of expertise.
Also knowing the people we are facilitating for. In the case of what Teresa was mentioning now, you come as an external, and hopefully we'll do that in the future. And that brings you come there with a perspective. In my case, I'm facilitating for my team, which comes also with its own challenges, but advantages, because you know how some people might react or not, or what might or not work for them.
I would like to add one thing that is take risks. So try new things. I think we can be quite comfortable on the things that we know will work and we know we can do it, but then to be challenging ourselves and taking risks and trying very, very difficult and new stuff on site or during the workshop, I think it's a way for me to learn a lot. And then, of course, getting feedback on and taking notes of what worked and what wasn't good. But taking risks, it's my way to learn and to improve myself.
Really quickly, I just want to applaud Andre about the taking risks, because what I do after many years of facilitation to keep learning and leveraging is I look for contrast in what I know and do. And I deliberately go online, and Miriam, that obviously NeverDoneBefore community offers that, many others that I belong to, but I look for who's doing something that is quite different. And then how do I integrate that, if I wish to, into the processes, the approaches that I use. And I find that powerful. The co-facilitation, love it. I'm not hearing the client willingness and being able to pay for it, or I then have to decide, how do I bring a co-facilitator in and split a very low fee? So there is a business aspect that sometimes I'm not hearing in the co-facilitation world. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, and I remember we had in the community an entire conversation about how to price co-facilitators, and actually inspired by that, I stopped asking clients or putting a co-facilitator in the proposal, but just assume or price one in if I think that it's appropriate. Yeah. Anyway, this was the last blurb. We're at the end of our little fishbowl experiment. I would love to invite everyone to turn their cameras on and then maybe have a round of applause, collective applause for SessionLab, and Debbie and Karen to provide us with the information and the framework, this amazing food for thought. And let's throw this talking stick. What are you taking away from this conversation? One insight, one idea, one curiosity.
I'll talk first. To be very intentional about how I help my trainees to present themselves to the world after the training. Thank you so much. This has been great. Do I pass it on, or anyone can take it?
I can take it because I have to jump as well. What I'm taking away is that you don't need accreditation or training or any of those stuff to actually be a very good facilitator. So yeah, I can pass it on to Teresa.
I don't use a lot of tech, and I'm still reflecting on, am I still using too much tech? Even though I don't use it very much. So that's what I'm thinking about. I'll pass it on to Michelle Hobbs.
Thanks. Yeah, so I have accreditation. So I'm thinking about, what is the market value for accreditation? That's kind of the thing that I'm pulling away in terms, I know we didn't talk about it specifically, but determining, what is the desire in the market. I'll pass it on to Deborah Rim-Moiso.
Oh my, I am taking away people who enjoy conversations with facilitators are so lovely. I was about to say facilitators, but maybe you're not all facilitators. There were moments when I think we were debating things that were triggering us, and yet the peace, maybe it's Miriam, I'm not sure. It's really, really, really nice to talk to people like this.
I'll jump in next. I want to +1 that. I get so much out of the collective wisdom of the people that show up to these events. And it just warms my heart to be part of this community. It is such a vibrant, caring, mindful community. So thank you, everyone. I think this was really awesome.
And I'm going to jump in to +1 on Liz. I think it is that collectiveness, that the wisdom of the crowd isn't so important. And that's what I've learned here and met a few new people that I hadn't met and learned from them.
I love the feeling of not being alone. So it's great to be here with you. And one takeout, I'm imagining the future of our profession. So as we move on having more and more facilitators and be more recognized as a professional, how will this shape in the future? And thank you a lot for holding this session.
Hi, my takeaway is that I got my self-dose cleared, particularly with the accreditation or getting a certificate of a course. In my life, like what I felt is like it is the moment, your decision to implement a certain process at that particular point of time based on the need of the hour at that particular moment. So I'm thankful to all the participants who shared their ideas and wisdom. Thank you.
It was lovely hearing all this different thoughts and discussions. I'm going to reflect on the accreditation because it had bothered me a lot. So it was very good to whether I need it or should I find it and which one is the good one or is any good one and exactly is there any value behind that. So and I just loved listening to this group being part and just getting involved in this. Thank you.
And I'm going to say the heartwarming again and thought-provoking. And I'm leaving with a very beautiful start to my day from the heart. And in the head, I'm really rethinking accreditation. Is it absolutely essential? I'm thinking it may be more for the growth and the credibility of the facilitation profession. Thank you all so much.
I'm happy to go next. My first time and totally newbie, so I take a lot from this session. I think particularly for someone like me, I might come with assumptions, the whole thing of the certification, yes or no, the community, yes or no. And what is clear to me is that just get into the journey and get going. And it's good that actually, because we have these online communities now, I think the support for me is really important. No? So having someone to discuss, to brainstorm with, to say, I don't know how to get it right. And you have 20 experts here telling you, there is not a right on this. I don't know what's right. The certifications with the tools. So that helps a little bit. I'm a perfectionist, no? So that helps me out to say, okay, I'm a perfectionist in my area of expertise. Imagine jumping to a total different area, right? So it's a little bit nerve-wracking. So it was fantastic for me to experience this. And I want to thank you for organizing and being so welcoming. And yeah, you helped me out even with this certification, tools, techniques. No, yes. Get going. Some of them will be good and some bad. And I find just the last comment. The challenges part, the dealing with conflict, the facilitating difficult situations, for me is the most scary part of all of this. And I find it quite interesting that even the experts have that. So thank you.
Shall I jump in next? Thank you very much for the conversation and for this. It was really insightful. And I take away the fact that Deborah said that she was amazed that people didn't know that facilitators were not part of our community, and that not many facilitators were part of communities, and this is so important. And I think sometimes people don't know that it's important. Sometimes you don't make that jump, to say that really it's really important to be part of our community. I don't know, this is my thought. Thank you very much, Miriam, everybody. Thank you.
I'm taking away that everything is much more complex than it seems. And I actually +1 Barb that I now believe that actually accreditation is even more important going forward because our profession is getting so large and getting recognized. So I was rather thinking, what else than IAF, or how can we have different possibilities for that? Because I think it's important. And I love this conversation. Thank you.
I am also taking away that the report is the data, the initial points, and some discussions that we have, and having this space to go even deeper into like one particular topic or two really helps us learn together as facilitators. And one of the things I'd love to do is possibly do this again next year if we can, because we can dig so much further into it, and the conversations are wonderful. All the learnings, there's a lot going on in my brain right now.
Everyone checked out? Wonderful. Thank you so much and have a wonderful day.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you for hosting this.
Thanks for joining us.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for staying tuned and for listening until the very end. I hope that you found the inspiration and the wisdom that you are looking for. And I hope that you will subscribe to the show so that you never miss any of the interviews with another inspiring facilitator from across the world. I'm devoted to continue this podcast and to deliver weekly an episode that maintains the quality that you expect and you deserve. And if you would like to help me to maintain this quality and to keep the podcast free, please help us. Visit workshops.work/support to make a small donation to keep the podcast free. Thank you so much. I hope to be in your ears next week.